Welcome back to Global Space Program in Realistic Progression 1, and we're going to be making some modifications to our prototype today. This is the prototype 5. I do have one of these missions queued up. I've done off camera the things I showed in the simulation, which is the Sun synchronous satellite, but we still have a solar powered satellite to go. So that's under construction right now. If we just pop out of here for a second and take a look at the build list, let's just see how long it's got to go. 1 second, once it loads. And click. So yeah, that's 100 days to build prototype 5, mainly because it's tooled. And in here, do I have the mission already? I don't, so we should probably take that mission. I think we get a year. Yes, we get a full year, so we could build another one if we needed to. And that's our solar powered satellite mission taken. So that is the prototype 5 already there. Now let me just show you, let me just jump into the VAB and show you that prototype 5. There is very little change, but there is a there's a terrible solar panel that we get to start with. Let me show you. So here's our prototype 5, and it has a couple of tiny, oh, hang on, did I not save this? I didn't save this. Oh, that's a shame. Anyway, the way I did is just basically throw away the science experiment and go into our electrical section and attach a couple of tiny solar panels like this, and basically built it. Now, so there's no difference from that from our previous prototypes, and this is only really, it's a token gesture that is not good enough for the amount of power that this current tier of avionics actually consumes. It needs 160 watts. Each of these only supply about 3 watts. If you have a look over here, 3.15 watts. So and they're on opposite sides of the thing of the craft to make everything balance out nicely. So yeah, only 3 watts is going to be produced by the sun at a particular point, so they are just really a token gesture. So perfectly fine for that to build, to operate as a solar powered satellite. It doesn't matter that it's not sustainable, it's just getting that particular mission and testing basically that there's a solar panels. And of course this sort of makes our solar panel craft in the same way that plugging in a 9-volt consumer battery into a Range Rover would make it a hybrid car. Yeah, so let's get rid of that mission is on build, and we can fly that, that's no problem. So why don't we just don't save out for a second, and I'm just going to load in our prototype 6. Now prototype 6 is what we built in the previous episode. It's not been tooled yet, and I was waiting for another node before I decided whether to do that or not. That node has now come and gone, or at least come and ready, and it is the node called Early Avionics and Probes. So in here, we have all these different probe bodies that we haven't built before. In particular, we have this 20-inch X-ray detector. We're going to come back to that because that's going to become important. It has a whole bunch of science on board. All kinds of different experiments, impacts, pressure, spectrometry, telemetry, radiation, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. And there is a fairly light avionics package as well that you can sort of grab and use. Anyway, before we get to that, the same node also unlocks upgrades for your various avionics. So if we go into configure and upper stage, you'll see there is now this. Now this, when you get to it the first time, it'll say 6,000, and there's another one in here for booster for early avionics. It'll say 15,000. I've already spent that off camera, so just be aware it's not free. It is the first time you actually have to pay up to 20 grand for these upgrades. However, it does mean that we can, for each of these, reconfigure things. So it's going to change things a little bit. That delta V is going to change, and not necessarily for exactly the better. This is just a technology upgrade, so it makes us a little bit more capable, and we'll see that a little bit further down the line. So we're currently on 7,799. Okay, so we're going to switch to the early avionics upper stage. Okay, and this I think is also an upper stage. Whoops, I need to just remove that configure. I think this is also an upper stage, or is it a booster? What's the craft weight on this when I remove the bottom section? That's the important part, or the craft mass I should say. It's 3.2 tons. This shouldn't be a booster, it should be upper stage clearly, so that's a mistake on my part. Whoops. So let's change this to an upper stage. Now, upper stage is sort of 3 ton plus on the current rated version, which is fine, but if we change this to the next version up, it gets to 5 tons plus. Okay, so technology upgrade. And I just need to remove that again. Okay, now this upper stage now only, well, actually, hang on. That needs 19 kilowatts or 19 watts. It's got two different requirements. Is that because this version can be set to shut down? And it has, you know, in its shutdown mode, it only needs 19 watts. Granted, our solar panels are still only 3, so that's still not good enough, but they will last a lot longer if that's the case. Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, moving down, this should then be, well, can be configured for, well, we can't go less than 5, so there's not much we can do there. Can we actually make this any smaller? What was this on before? That's about as small as we can go anyway, so I will leave it on that. Upper stage configuration, good. And we'll leave that alone. So let's bring in the rest of the rocket. Attach it where it should be. We're still hovering around 11K. Going to be minor adjustments here and there. And then the avionics at the bottom, we're definitely in booster, and we should change this around. So let's take a look at what it currently is set to, just so that we can see. So its tonnage is set to 43. That needs to be changed. I think the whole thing is 60 tons. Yes, so that needs to be upped a little bit. So 60 tons on this stage will be fine, and we should be okay. So that's 8265, but we can increase the size of this. I was playing around with this a little bit off camera. So the minimum cost is sort of around that kind of size for this particular thing, and it's 10,799 if we get it to that size. However, we're going to jump up to early avionics, and that slider amount is 405 tons. We do not need 405 tons, but if you have a look at what happens to the price, if we bring this down to 60 or so, yeah, 61, and then we bring its length down, we should be able to make some savings at some point. Let's see. Mass 500 kilograms. Can we make this even smaller? What's the change in cost? Is about 400 versus the change in size. We can have its mass, so we can get another 50 delta V, or sorry, 150 delta V, just by bringing its size down quite a lot. I guess we can try and play with that a little bit. It jumps up immediately at this kind of bottom end, but if we just play with that a little bit, yeah, we jump down to something reasonable. And we've still got 100 delta V extra. Good. I like that. And that should be controllable. Although we do need to... oh, hang on. The vehicle mass is... Is that with everything in? Let me just double check that. Yeah, sorry. Its mass is 44. 60 is the limit. So 44. Let's just bring this down a little bit further. And there we go, around about there. Again, the cost is still roughly the same, but you know, we can play around with it. Its power requirements do change, I think, with tonnage. Yeah, it's that does change, and its cost does change as well with tonnage. But yeah, we don't need to worry about it too much. In fact, we can even play with it around to bring it down to 41, to be honest. 41 should do the job, because this next one up is, you know, deals with extra 5 tons. So we can even go down to 40. Yeah, that should still be just fine. So 7,700, we've not really had to spend any extra for this. We'll see what that actually starts costing when we think of upgrading everything else. So let's just close that off. We got all the avionics upgraded in this prototype 6. Save that off. And we're going to be flying this, I think. I think we're going to be going for 1 or 2 missions. However, what we should think about is maybe a replacement upper stage for the top section here. And let's just name this prototype 7. Clearly, I just need a better naming system. Maybe you guys can suggest some names in the comments below. In any case, up here, we're going to think about building something around this 20-inch X-ray detector. So, do we have enough delta V to get towards orbit if we just use these first 2 stages and without this error B yet? At some point you will get to the ability to use an AJ10 and your first stage to get into orbit entirely, but I'm not sure if we're quite there yet. Let's just quickly try this out and give it a go. So I'm just going to remove you, and then we're just going to get rid of the rest entirely, I think. Okay, and then we're going to just buy the X-ray detector. It's the probe core here. Are you around? Yes, this should be a basketball. Okay, and what happens if we just have the basketball with this attached? So we have 10,371. With that alone, we essentially have a probe core that can go into orbit without that entire upper stage. The Airbee is defunct for low Earth orbit. Although we may want to think about putting other stuff on this. Reason being that it's going to be quite a large power draw if we have this much sort of procedural stuff on it. So we can think about a different stage at the top. We can probably think about attaching a little bit of a battery. Not very much. Yes, maybe let's just, why don't we widen that out and bring in its length. Okay. And then maybe we can think about some solar panels. Now let's see what we can do for this. How much power do you need? And of course it lists its power in electric charge, but then it says electric charge 1 watt. Okay, so as long, and that's for the antenna, of course. So I'm never quite sure how you convert electric charge to watts. Someone in the comments can say, but electric charge in watts is actually fine because we know we have solar panels capable of more than 1 watt. So as long as it's spinning in space, it should pick up enough solar charge, electric charge, solar power. Fine. So if we just put a couple of tiny solar panels on this thing and build ourselves a little new core, just 2 will do the job, I think. Yeah. And I'm not sure if this antenna that's in here is actually is compatible with what I need it to be compatible with. Are you... let's take a look. Don't see anything about the about what its compatibility is. What I'm actually looking for is this. So Reflectron DP10 is remote tech compatible. So if we have one of those, that basically covers us for any problems sending this with remote tech or making transmissions with remote tech. So if we just put this in place around the sides, something like that, that looks ugly. I'm going to have to move it. I'm sorry. But no, well, let's just build this in a little bit. Okay. And we can rotate it around and stuff like that, but that's not particularly needed. So the craft, as it is 35 kilograms. Okay. And what happens if we then just switch back to place mode and put this back? Okay, that looks pretty good. 10,235, still fine for orbit, I believe. Only problem, however, is that although that's enough delta V for orbit, we don't really have a controllable firing of the upper stage. So like earlier prototypes, this will work, but you have to either fly all the way up powered, i.e. never circularize. Well, in fact, that's the only way to do it. The upper Airbee stage enabled us to fire that separately. We could separate the AJ-10 entirely, and this could wait, along with a little bit of RCS, to actually get further in, to get further up into the orbital path. Fine. So we could also, attach the rest of this as well. We could have an alternate prototype. So let's just save that as number 7 and 7A. What happens if we bring back that earlier version? So let me just save that for a second, and I'm just going to open 6. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just take everything below, let's say here, because that's the RCS tank. I'm going to save this as a subassembly. So there you go, and P6 entire body. Save that off, and let's just reopen. Don't save. Reopen that 7A. Okay, and we have everything else there. So let's just take off the rest of the rocket and throw it away for a second, and load in P6 entire body and snap it into place. Now, of course, the payload fairings are entirely wrong. They need to be changed. And we need to perhaps change some other stuff. But that is fine to get started with. We need to fill this with, well, we need to sort the staging out. That'll be why. So you can go there. Okay, so this is 12,287. It's not quite enough for what we need for a lunar probe. For a lunar probe, we need something close to 4K in that top stage. We have 4K in that top stage. However, the stage below it is not enough to get into orbit. So if we use this top stage to try and fire towards the moon, we need the rest of it to be a little bit better. And that is 7.8. We need to be a fair bit better, to be clear, or save a little bit of weight in this top stage. So after checking a delta V map of the solar system, this top stage needs around 3,260, I want to say, delta V. So we could play around with that quite easily and just bring in our utilization. So we can just basically do the equivalent of, you know, consume less space inside this body with our tank, which is what the utilization thing does. So we can bring that down, and that is 4K. So 3,260. I got that quite spot on just by accident. Okay, now that takes up less space in the top section, and you'll see further down here we've now got 8.6, and that's about 800 meters per second shy of getting into orbit. Thereabouts. Let me just double check. Yeah, it's around 9,400 meters per second. Depends how well you fly it. So that is that. So because this whole thing is not tooled, we could compact this a little bit. It's probably useful for us to do that and bring down the size of this tank entirely. So again, because it's not tooled, let's just change the length of this. Let's bring this in. So we want 3,260, 3,127, 3,254, 3,260. Much more compact stage, I'm sure you'll agree. And, well, unfortunately, 8.7 on the bottom one. So we still need 700, so even with the extra savings of the mass of the tank itself. So we need to make more savings. Fine. I'm not quite sure if this is particularly controllable, however. I could do with the checker from earlier versions to tell me whether it actually will fly. Is there actual avionics in this thing? Or do I also need avionics in addition to all the rest? Because that's going to throw things out. We'll try in a simulation, and if it's not controllable, then we'll just have to reconfigure things. Now, whatever we do with that upper stage, we need to just extend the payload fairings. So we need to just change that shape a little bit. And that is just by increasing the top end of the fairing. Okay, that will do. That will change the mass, however, so you've got to be careful about when that actually gets discarded. And then we've got to think about maybe making this bottom section either heavier or basically have more, when I say heavier, I mean more fuel. That would obviously overburn what this engine is currently rated for. Now, we have in a couple of years another node that actually will upgrade our engines. This is not it right now. So if we can't do that, then we've got to think about maybe adding some boosters. And do we have any boosters yet? I think there is another node we need for the boosters. So we may have to go for liquid fuel boosters again. And that is not quite as good as having solid boosters. We have non-RO upper stage stuff. That's not really what I'm looking for. Let me see if we have anything available that's in any way meaningful, because the Tiny Tim booster, it's just not going to do any good. We are so close. so close. Look at this delta V stats. This is without any boosters. We don't have any solid rocket boosters that can help, and liquid ones, well, I'd rather stay away from them if possible, just because they increase the size of the craft hugely until we have something a little bit better. We don't necessarily need all that. So instead, I've decided to go for an overburn of this first stage by an extra 10-15 seconds or so. You know, it's not huge amounts, but it could cause failures. That is a risk. So we've got to deal with it. So we don't want to stretch it too much. And of course, you have a lot of lower limit for thrust to weight ratio Sea level is 1.4, so it's already going to be fairly slow taking off. However, up here we still have to play around with the things a little bit more. What I was just wondering, we've got 12488 at the moment. If we just take this off for a second, take off the procedural battery, and what is it if we just buy the non-procedural battery? It's still compatible, but it's just slightly different. So that is 0.097 versus 0.035. So that's gonna go away. That's no good. Can we actually play with this thing a little bit more? Is there anything we can actually shave off? Well, we can go with one antenna. Now, the antennas are going to be problematic in that if we do get towards a moonshot, we may not even have enough range for these. I need to check out what the range is, but to get started, we can just attach one lowly little antenna to this. Or even we can just go with the default one and just, wait to see what the range is like. 0.03. What we're really looking for is just a change in this 12,605. Yeah, that's getting to it. Let's just bring this down a little bit. So we want this stage 3260 again. It's going to require very small increments of change in length, or changes in the actual utilization here. We can change that a little bit if we just go over this somewhat. So 3334 or whatever it is. And we can justify it. Well, we can just change this a little bit here. And 3255, maybe 91, 3271, that'll do. So 12,570 meters per second. So aside from this top stage, what's the rest of it? We've got 8, we've got 9.2, 9.3. Yeah, it's very, very, very close. So we're going to use this as our first probe to actually try this out, and once we get a solid rocket booster, we can attach that to the bottom and actually perhaps get a little bit more out of this. So I'm just going to tailor this a little bit more, and I'll see you on the pad for some simulation. And here we are out on the pad. So just as a simulation, why don't we just zoom out from a really beautifully rendered Earth. This is just the kind of nice things you get with Scatterer. That's kind of really nice. And we can zoom out and select the moon. So if we set this as target and come back in, you'll see we basically have an option to launch into the plane of target. And then a timer will start counting down. So if we engage the autopilot and we can select auto warp, it should warp us to when it needs to actually take off, I think. Yep, there it goes. So this may end up still being a daytime launch because it still should go through the night, come back up, hopefully soon. Yep, there it goes. And should take off and get us reasonably close to the plane of the moon. So this is, once you have the various flight planning things, this is sort of how you actually get things for a moonshot. Otherwise, you have to do sort of eyeball and reckoning, and let's avoid that. Let's see how well this actually goes. So it's got 10 seconds, so it's awaiting liftoff at this particular point. And of course, we can take off at any particular point. Will it actually take off automatically? Let's see. I need to auto stage. Yeah, it will. If I've got auto stage on, that is. And off it goes. Do remember you need to turn off auto stage once we get rid of the payload fairing bays. You don't want that upper stage to be entirely automatic. However, we can fast forward. This rocket does tend to be stable enough for that actually to occur, unlike earlier rockets when you deal with aerodynamics on the wing surfaces. That doesn't tend to be quite as good. So we can fast forward through this, and much easier. So going through a minute left on that first stage. And I've left all the parameters alone based on the previous sort of step. We can leave this to, let's actually just change this to 0. We don't need to worry about that for the moment. It is just a simulation. And yeah, we got mass spectrometry, so I guess we can send that back. And that will go back. Not that it actually really matters for this, but that's fine. And we've got, let's just fast forward again. MechJeb should handle the staging just fine as well. So out we go. And off it goes, and it should get rid of the payload. There we go. So we can turn off auto stage now. And now we pretty much have a needle probe. I did put that other antenna back on. It would have just been unbalanced if I hadn't done it. We need to be very, very careful with these earlier rockets about any kind of torque applied to the upper stage. that you can. And of course we've got our little RCS units and stuff like that. So we can't fast forward at the moment, or at least can't do a normal fast forward. We have to do physical time warp forward. What I'm really looking to see is if that probe core can actually has some avionics on it. I don't think it does. So if not, then this next stage will not be in any way controllable. However, that just means that we know we're going to need a boost to the bottom stage, and we're going to need some avionics in the top. So we've got to come in ahead to 20 seconds or so. Let's slow back down to real time. And you can see our periapsis is coming up, so we're going to be close to orbit. However, our APO is going massively, massively out of out of joint. Yeah, so we're going to be far, far away from where we need to be. We can control that with the curve of the ascent, and we can control it with final flight path angle. But you can see here we are not quite at orbit. Now we could play around with that a little bit more and end up with perhaps something that is better. But this is the disadvantage in that we normally would use this upper stage for the circularization, and by all means it will certainly do that right now. However, what we'd like is for us to be in orbit before we get to this stage, so we can use this stage entirely for everything else. So let's take a look at what the electric charge is doing. That's actually a lot of electric charge. We can't reduce that battery size anymore. There is a battery, I think, on this one as well. Yep, so that's got the majority of electric charge in it. So we could even think about losing this battery and having everything at the top with the power passed down, and that could save us a little bit of weight. Does it tell us how much weight is actually there? No, we'll go and look at that back in the VAB once we're done. But let's take a look at how close this has got to the plane of the moon. Yep, that's pretty close. Okay, so why don't we just see how far this thing will go? We are, broadly speaking, where are we right now in the path? Yep, we're right here. So why don't we just see, yeah, let's just see what the performance is like. It should take us fairly far out. So let's get rid of the previous stage and enable RCS. Insufficient avionics. That's exactly what I was afraid of. Yep, it supports naught and vehicle is 350 kilograms. So we need the smallest possible upper stage avionics that we can. And maybe we can take a look at those options there. So we can't turn anything on really at this particular point. Can't really do all that much. I don't even think we can separate. Really? No, we're pretty much dead in the water. Or not. In any case, that's going to run. And we're now in orbit. Of course, we're going to be much, much further than orbit in a second, because we're going to be heading out. Now, how far we get should be interesting. Let's get overhead. That's overhead. We are not out of fuel, so something failed. Yeah, something did fail. We didn't have any orientation or control over the orientation and stuff like that. So, yeah, as you might expect with no avionics. So that's fairly fine for a first simulation. Obviously, we need to make a few changes. Back here in the VAB then, let's take a look at what we can save in terms of weight. So 12,452, that's okay so far. Why don't we just save it by taking off this battery? What do we get to now? Let's get rid of you. 12,573. That's getting pretty good. Yeah, like the top delta V is not good, but that's gonna go down in just a second when we actually decide what we're going to do for avionics. So what do we have here? We have the option of the Able Avionics package. That is 140 kilograms basically. And let's take a look at what we can bring the procedural avionics down to. So let's bring in the diameter to be the same as that, and let's bring in the length, and then we'll change this to configuration. We'll change this to upper stage, and we'll change it to the top option that we is that that's the smallest we can, that is the smallest we can make it with that one. How about with another one? Is there yeah, okay, so we can bring it down to that size. That's still hilariously large. We'd have to actually make it larger in diameter to bring down its length, I think. So yeah, why don't we just bring back this? What would its length need to be to get the diameter down to be the same as the RCS tank? Let's bring that up a little bit. Bring the diameter to the same as the RCS tank. What's that diameter? It's 625. So 625. Just one of the standard sizes there. And bring down the length as much as possible. Okay, so that's as far as we can bring the length down. That's a shame. Although it still fits within the payload fairing, so that is still fine because all of this is protected from the air. So power requirements, yes, we've got some power requirements. Configure, let's just get rid of that for a second. And what does this do to our delta V? Yeah, look at that. It kills our delta V. 11,618. So that's not going to be great. And there's not really all that much we can do about it without compensating for that without extra delta V from somewhere else. So we can do things like overburning the AJ10. And yes, that can cause failures too. So if that's 2 minutes 25, we can try and stretch that stage a little bit. Maybe take that to 2 minutes 40. But at the end of the day, it's that top stage that's now the problem because it needs to be 3260. And with the avionics attached, it's 2386. So we're going to have a bit of a problem there. This needs to be longer, and that's fine because the RB will certainly last for that length, but it will then change all the numbers for everything further below it. So if you can't spin stabilize and shoot it towards basically off towards the moon at a specific stage using AJ10s, i.e. here, and then everything here is dumbfire, if you like, then we're going to need a different approach. So we're going to need extra engines, but I will leave it over here to you guys. Do you see a solution that doesn't require me to go for an engine upgrade? Put it in the comments below. However, what I'm going to use this for is a test bed for this X-ray detector. We have a new upper stage. It will continually to get better. We'll re-engineer this upper stage as long as we need to. We could even try it again without the avionics package, as long as we could get directly into orbit with the AJ10. So if we can actually modify that, then we can lose this. Okay, so that can just be essentially a dumbfire upper stage. That's not going to be great because we need some kind of control for the RCS. We may as well lose the RCS if this is not, if this doesn't have any kind of control, and we can just go back to spin stabilized if we were going to do that. I'd rather not go back to spin stabilized. I'd rather have an uncontrollable upper stage. So I will go and put the avionics back. In fact, what was the other thing? Let's just take a look at the avionics for a second. How much weight did that actually add? Because we need to look at weight as well. So diameter was 625. And let's just change this from booster. How much does it weigh? 174 kilograms. Okay, let's change that to upper stage. And 3 tons. So 54 kilograms. That's already much, much lighter. That's what I was actually checking. Than going for something like the Able Avionics, which is 140 kilograms by default. So yes, this Able Avionics would be more suitable for the AJ10 stage. So how much does this weigh? Or how much does this AJ10 stage weigh? Because what we could do is try and replace this stage. So let's just take this off for a second. So it's 2.6 tons. And how much does the avionics weigh? That weighs 66 kilograms. So still no point going for the non-procedural stuff. It's still much better to go for the other ones. Fine, I have no problems with that as well. There is, of course, very early guidance units as well, but I don't think they are any better than the procedural versions. So I am happy with going for that. That's about the most efficient as I actually can get this for the current level of technology. It gets much better later when we have various different things like engine relights, but that turns the AJ10 stage into a really good option to circularize. But we'll get to that in another episode. For now, what I'm going to do is use this again. I'm going to use it, sending it up into a polar orbit, and we'll use this just as a test bed for a controllable version of this. It's still 11,618, of course, still not enough for the moon, but it should get us to a point whereby we can get, excuse me, into orbit really quite easily and just cut off the engines once we're in the right position. This will get us science from all the different biomes, whatever's available from this X-ray detector. And next episode we'll come back to going to spend stuff. So this episode has been mostly a building episode. Next episode probably more of a spending science, fast forwarding to the engine upgrades and seeing how much of a change that actually makes for us. Of course, you're more than welcome to mention in the comments down below if you see a better way around this. That doesn't require huge amounts of boosters attached to the bottom stage. We have solid rocket boosters coming in about 200 days, so that's not going to be too bad. Anyway, I'll leave it here for this episode. And we'll see you next episode for hopefully, well, maybe a lunar shot. It depends on just how much technology we get and how much science we get. But that's my next objective. And this has been the prototype for the lunar sort of vehicle. All right. As always, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Feel free to give it a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time for some more Realistic Progression 1.